Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, and in today's video we're doing something a little bit different because according to Bleacher Report, these 5 NBA players desperately need to be traded. So this is an article that I found that only came out a couple of hours ago as we're recording of this video, and I just thought it'd be fun to go through these 5 players and talk about their situations individually. But quickly, before the video gets started, I have 2 things to plug. The first is that I was on B-Souls' podcast. It came out yesterday, and it was super fun. A really fun group of people to just sit around and talk about basketball with. I would encourage you guys to go check that out. I'll leave it down in the description below. And also, by the time you're watching this, I will probably be live on Twitch as well, playing some Warzone. If you want to come and hang out, talk about some basketball, that's a great place to do that outside of the comment section of these videos. Twitch.tv/Spolo_TD. With that said, the usual stuff. If you enjoy the content, then consider subscribing. Leaving a like rating really helps me out, and let's go and get started. Okay, so first up is a bit of an interesting one, and it's Aaron Gordon of the Orlando Magic. And I think a lot of people are going to try and come up with some ways to mess with this Magic roster because they just didn't have the kind of season you would have hoped that they would have, and now they're going to be going into next year without Jonathan Isaac as well due to his injury in the bubble. So that might be the instigator for a potential, maybe not rebuilding of this roster, but a retooling of this roster. If you're looking at trade situations, I feel like Aaron Gordon and Nikola Vucevic are 2 of the most valuable players on the roster that they could potentially get significant pieces back for, and that they potentially have replacements for as well, with Mo Bamba for Vucevic, and then once Isaac is healthy, obviously you have him there for Aaron Gordon as well. And it's not necessarily that I don't like Aaron Gordon as a player. You can see in this article it says Aaron Gordon has spent all 6 of his seasons in Orlando. The next time he encounters anything close to ideal on-court conditions will be the first, essentially meaning he's been playing out of position with limited spacing for his entire career. But my thing with Aaron Gordon is his contract actually continues to go down over the next couple of seasons, and that provides value to the Magic. While on the other hand, I'm not sure who's getting really excited about an Aaron Gordon trade. Maybe he gets swapped for some other young pieces, maybe potentially to like Chicago or something, or maybe the Nets try and figure out a deal because they definitely need, a kind of a 3-4 combo type player in their front court to help alongside the stars that they're going to have next year. But for Gordon specifically, I think the trade idea makes sense. I just struggle to think of potential possible destinations for him. But as always, I'm interested to see if you guys can come up with some for Aaron Gordon down in the comment section below. The next one is a pretty obvious one, and it's Al Horford. We'll probably do either a Sixers trade machine or an Al Horford trade machine at some point. But again, this one is a really difficult one to figure out a trade for because of the monstrosity of a contract that Al Horford is on. And pretty much everybody knew that this was probably a bad idea when they made the deal last year, and it just doesn't work in Philadelphia. His skill set doesn't work alongside Joel Embiid. Whatever they were trying to do there by having kind of a backup plan in case Joel Embiid got hurt, it didn't work out. And now they're left with this monstrous contract and needs throughout the rest of the roster, and a player that is relatively untradeable. Not completely untradeable, but it's definitely going to be difficult. He was involved in a Houston Rockets trade machine video the other day in which he was going to Houston because they needed a big man in exchange for someone like Aaron Gordon. I think that's about best case scenario at this point if they get a really good usable perimeter player in exchange for Al Horford and his giant contract, but it's going to be really difficult. And the article says, when 76ers general manager Elton Brand spoke of the need to complement Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid better, he might as well have been pointing to a billboard of Al Horford. It's a roster construction issue in Philadelphia. I think there's a good amount of talent there, certainly a good amount of talent to be one of the best defensive teams in the league, albeit probably with some struggles offensively to come along with that. But just overall, the roster isn't constructed properly. And if we're going by desperate need of a trade, I think Al Horford is certainly near the top of the list here. And a very similar situation is Kevin Love of the Cleveland Cavaliers, another player with a huge contract that's getting older. And there were rumors that he was going to be moved last season potentially to Portland. That never came about, and I think there's a significant gap here between what the Cavs think Kevin Love's value is as a former All-Star, as a former champion, and what other teams think Kevin Love's value is as an aging player that's had some injury issues and is going to be on a huge contract for the next couple of seasons. And realistically, I don't even know how many times I've said this, they never should have re-signed him to the big deal that they did after LeBron left in the first place. But ultimately, that decision is what's making him so difficult to trade. If Kevin Love was on an expiring deal or on a 2-year deal, I could see a Mike Conley, Marc Gasol type deal being put together for him, where you're not getting crazy good assets in terms of young players, but you're maybe getting a pick or two that's, later on in the first round. Maybe you're getting a nice young player, which for the Cavs would certainly be helpful at this point, because they've got some okay up and coming players, guys like Colin Sexton. But beyond that, there's not a ton of future value on this roster. So to get anything in exchange for Kevin Love would be big for them, and I'm sure Love would love to. I'm sure he would also really like to get out of Cleveland. And so again, the desperate need for a trade thing absolutely makes sense. But is there value there? Just because the player wants to be traded and a team wants to trade them doesn't mean that there is a trade to be made there. And I think as you look around the league, it becomes increasingly difficult to find a team with the assets that would interest the Cavaliers and with salaries that they would be able to match Kevin Love's with, and that would actually want him on the roster and feel like he would legitimately help their team. So it's something to keep an eye on moving forward. Maybe some suitors will emerge, but at the moment, it seems difficult, just like the Al Horford thing, to envision a Kevin Love trade. Next up is a really interesting one, and it's Chris Paul, the Oklahoma City Thunder. And it's not that I'm surprised that there's a possibility that Paul will be traded here, but the title of the article is desperately need to be traded, as if Chris Paul is just dying to get out of Oklahoma City. And I don't doubt that he wants to leave and that he wants to go and play somewhere that has a more legitimate chance at making a deep postseason run. But a desperate need to get out of Oklahoma City seems a little bit crazy to me. But with the recent changes within the organization, not bringing back Billy Donovan, seemingly a team that wants to be a little bit more financially responsible moving forward, paying someone like Chris Paul over $40 million for the next couple of seasons doesn't really align with those goals, right? So I can definitely see a trade developing there. I'm working on a Milwaukee Bucks trade machine video right now. I know that he has been rumored to potentially go to Milwaukee, but I've also seen a couple of really smart things that say that if you're in a situation in which you want to make sure that Giannis is happy so that he re-signs, I don't know if Chris Paul is the guy that you bring in to make that happen. As good of a player as he is, and as much as he would probably help them win, the personality difference there could be a bit of an issue. So then you go and look at some other teams around the league where Chris Paul could potentially go. The Knicks thing is kind of out of the question. It's going to be, if he does get moved, some team that is in position to be like a top 4 team in their respective conference and potentially make a run at it. And he's definitely increased his value this year compared to what it was last year. People thought he had lost a step, and this year now all of a sudden he's back to being an all-NBA caliber player. So despite the huge contract, I think there is some value here for Oklahoma City. Nothing crazy, but they can definitely get something for him, and more than they would have gotten for him had they tried to move him immediately after receiving him from the Houston Rockets last offseason. So the team specifically is a little bit difficult to come up with at the moment, but I think out of all the players that we've talked about to this point, just in terms of on-court value, Chris Paul provides the most. You could argue that Aaron Gordon is more likely to be traded just because of the payroll difference there, but if you're just looking at the player, there's a lot of teams that would love to have Chris Paul on their roster, and I would imagine they're going to be pretty aggressive in moving him to try and get out from under that contract. And last up now, as definitely an outlier in this, is Thaddeus Young of the Chicago Bulls. I definitely don't think of Thaddeus Young as a desperately needed trade, but I do remember last offseason when he signed what I believe was either a 3-year or a 4-year $41 million deal. I identified it as one of the worst deals of the offseason in terms of value, in terms of money, in terms of long-term, expense. I didn't think that it was a very good move at all for Chicago, and people were coming at my throat like, nah, they're going to make the playoffs. The Bulls are going to be good. You need veteran presence. They got to spend their money somewhere. It wasn't a good idea to bring him in. And it's not that he's a bad player. It was just a questionable fit in Chicago with front court players that you wanted to develop in the first place. And even though he does a lot of things well, shooting is not one of the things that he does well. And it just is really difficult for a complementary option to be a really efficient part of a team when they don't shoot the basketball well. So I could see someone making a move for Thaddeus Young thinking that he's going to be kind of their Jeremy Grant light type player. Keep in mind, last offseason, the Nuggets sent a first-round pick to Oklahoma City in exchange for Jeremy Grant, and he has been huge in their postseason run, being able to guard some of the better wings in the Western Conference on their run to the Western Conference Finals. And I could see Thaddeus Young not necessarily being in the exact same category as Jeremy Grant, but you could talk yourself into, okay, this guy is a 4 that can defend a little bit, can rebound a little bit, isn't going to be a great shooter, but brings a lot of energy to the team and is going to be able to guard for us a little bit. I could see that mindset coming about, and potentially a team like, I don't know, like the Brooklyn Nets, like whoever that needs a little bit of that on their roster, I wouldn't be surprised to see someone make a move. Now, the value for Thaddeus Young is certainly not going to be high, given the contract, given his age, given that he's not an incredibly valuable player. I don't know that we're going to be seeing a ton of assets exchanged in a Thaddeus Young deal, and it's just interesting that he was even included in the article. It's almost like they just needed to get to 5 to round out the number, but still, someone that I could definitely see being moved. And yeah, there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video. I know it was something a little bit different, but I wanted to try something out, talk about this article, talk about trade stuff outside of like a super rigid structure of a video. And I really enjoyed it. I hope you guys did as well. As I said in the beginning of the video, my name is Tucker. I thank you guys very much for watching. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.